The angel of the Lord went out to Satan, Balaam, the prophet. Now, does that sound a little bit odd in English? Well, sure it does. How can we use that Satan as a verb? That's why we see in all these English translations, they don't translate it as Satan, even though that's what it is in the Hebrew. So let's look at some of these English translations. But God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. That's the NIV. The New Living Translation says, the angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way. The English Standard Version uses that word adversary. The angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. And the King James Version is similar, saying adversary. So in all English Bibles, it comes out as being to oppose, to withstand, to block the way, or to be an adversary against him. And these were the actions of the angel of the Lord. Okay? There's not some Satan and demons on an opposing team. This is the angel of the Lord doing this or acting in this role. So turning now to the context of what's going on, this is a really interesting story, to say the least. There's a donkey that talks. I mean, we've only heard about something like this in the Garden of Eden, where there's a serpent that talks. So this is quite an interesting and wild story. So what's going on here? Let's give some context. It's quite a long story. It spans a few chapters, actually. So in Numbers chapter 22, you have Balak, the king of Moab. He tries to incite, he tries to hire, he tries every possible way to get this Balaam prophet to curse the Israelites, because he heard all these stories of how the Israelites were coming into the lands and taking over and all this. So he wants Balaam to curse the Israelites. And then there's many, many rounds where he goes and he inquires of God, and God says, you shall not curse them. In fact, you shall not even go with these men of Balak. And then every time Balaam tells him, I can't curse those people, and I cannot go with your men. And the Balak, king of Moab, keeps getting mad and keeps getting angry. I'm summarizing the story here. And so here's what happened here. Why would God get upset with Balaam? Because Balaam, he would only bless the Israelites and not curse them. So why did God get mad? Okay, continuing, Numbers 22. We're jumping down to verse 12. God told Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. Okay, skipping down to verse 20. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men have come to call you, rise and go with them, but only do what I tell you. Doesn't that seem like a big contradiction right there? So at first God is saying, don't even go with them. But then later he's saying, yeah, go with them, but don't curse the Israelites. And so Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went. Why is the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible like this? Why are there these strange things like this? Well, one of the themes in the Hebrew Bible is that God is kind of testing in a way. He'll give these commands, and then things will happen. And it even says, like in Deuteronomy and different places, that even if some prophet should come and tell you to do something that I've told you not to do, don't believe that prophet. That's a false prophet. But here we see it's actually God is like saying something different. Uh, Maybe it is a little bit of a test. It's, but ultimately in the end, it should have been that Balaam stuck to what God originally said, the first thing that God said. But it kind of seemed maybe Balaam wanted to go with them. We're filling in the blanks a little bit here. We don't know exactly what happened. The text doesn't say exactly. So in any case, whichever it is, God was angry with Balaam. He allowed him to go, but he's not allowed to curse the Israelites. He's allowed to go to Balak. So let's look at what happened here. So God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. Now he was riding on a donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road, with sword drawn in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field, and Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back into the road. And this is quite a comical story. I mean, it's a sad story. I mean, he's beating the donkey. And then what happens in the story is it says God opens the mouth of the donkey, and the donkey spoke to Balaam and said, "Why are you striking? Why are you hitting me? Haven't I been such a great, faithful donkey to you and taken you places?" And so this is a wild story. And then so Balaam tries to turn the donkey again, but then but it's a more narrow spot. It's a narrow area, and the angel of the Lord is like right in that narrow area, so there's no way to go to the right or to the left. And then so Balaam is striking the donkey again, and then after that, that's where the donkey starts to talk. So if go, I invite anybody, please read this story. I mean, it's quite a story. Um, so here I'm skipping down to verse 32. It says again, the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times?" Okay, so not only the donkey talks to Balaam and says, "Why are you hitting me?" The angel of the Lord is directly confronting Balaam and says, why did you strike your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. So, let me just go on to finish what happens, because this is a very long story. He never does actually curse the Israelites, but God was unhappy with him because he did go when originally he was not supposed to go. But that's not even the biggest issue. Okay, here's what happened later, a couple chapters later. I know this will seem radically different. It's a couple chapters later, but we're going to tie this together. This is in chapter 25, beginning of the chapter. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. This is a big deal, okay? For people who are really into Bible, what you're going to find is this story right here gets repeated all the way to Revelation. Look it up, please. I mean, this story, it's repeated in Deuteronomy, that this was such a horrible thing that happened. It gets repeated even in the book of Revelation, where, they're talking about this yoking themselves to foreign gods. So it started out where they were being with the women, okay, of Moab, and then these women of Moab sort of enticed them, to start, sacrificing or bowing down to the foreign gods. And this is a huge deal all through the Old Testament, and then even up in Revelation, where they mention this Balaam, or it really makes a name for himself through the whole Bible. The New Testament mentions this. So, how is Balaam involved with this? Well, you go down to Numbers 31, so now we're many chapters away, and they're tagging him to this, saying like this was like his fault, uh, in a way. So in Numbers 31:16, behold, these on Balaam's advice, that would be the women taking Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in inciting poor. And so the plague came upon the congregation of the Lord. So they are saying that it was Balaam's fault in talking to the women of Moab to go and entice the Israelite guys to get them to get with them, and then get them to worship foreign gods also. So they're pinning this to Balaam. That's why Balaam gets is talked about so horribly through the Bible and even into the New Testament. Okay, so going back to this thing about opposing or adversary, we're going to look at some references, okay? So, if you look up the word Satan in the Hebrew Bible, there are 27 occurrences of the Hebrew word Satan. That doesn't mean it's always going to be in English as Satan, okay? But in Hebrew, there are 27 matches. And the very, very first match of the word Satan in the Hebrew Bible is in Numbers. Let me go to the other screen. So here in Numbers 22, it's the first occurrence we find in the Hebrew Bible using the word Satan. And you can look at all 27 of these references in the Strongs. It's H7854, okay? And here the angel of the Lord stood in the way for a Satan against him. And again in Numbers 22:32, the next reference of this, the angel of the Lord said to him, okay, and said, I went out to withstand thee because thy way was perverse before the Lord. So in the King James, they're using that word withstand, but literally it would be, the angel of the Lord said, I went out to Satan you. But of course, that doesn't make much sense in English, right? Now, just so we know that this word is actually the real word, Satan, you can look at all these other references, okay? So in 1 Samuel, the adversary, or Satan, is actually a person, okay? 2 Samuel also, 1 Kings, there's a few references in 1 Kings. The Lord stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, the name being Hadad the Edomite. Okay, so this person is actually in a role of a Satan against Solomon because of Solomon's disobedience. There's another one in 1 Kings 11. And God stirred up another adversary, Rezon, son of Hiladad. Okay, and that was also a person who is a Satan against Solomon. Okay, very interesting. Finally, when you get down to First Chronicles and Job, we see the reason why the English actually says Satan in English is because it's Ha-Satan, or the Satan in Hebrew. So that's why they actually start to say the name Satan. But you can see H7854, it is the same Hebrew word, okay, in all of these references, going all the way back to the book of Numbers.